Hello, I'm Peter Holmes, as in Sherlock, and this is Dfpkt, or Definition, Facts, Propositions, Knowledge and Truth. So, unambitious or what? Now, by way of getting my retaliation in first, here's a foreword. First, this is an attempt to clarify and synthesise ideas from my previous papers and from online contributions to discussion groups. But it can only ever be a work in progress. Second, this is not an academic exercise, so there is little or no scholarly apparatus. And third, I do not claim originality for any of it. My aim is to make the glaringly obvious a little more visible. So, I'm aiming this mainly at people interested in philosophy, or ideas in general, or at least people puzzled by the invented difficulties of philosophy. And I'm proposing, if not a cure, then perhaps a mild prophylactic against the confusion that the compulsion to philosophise can cause. Now, the way I'm going to do it is I'll read out bits and then pause to emphasise things sometimes, or explain or expand them. So sort of busking on the text. And mindful of accessibility, I've broken it up into 4 parts to make it perhaps more digestible. So this is the first of 4 Dfpkt pods. Oh, and by the way, as there are no visuals, you can just listen to it if you prefer. However, if you want to follow the text, you can find it at Amazon in the collection that, because it seemed a good idea at the time, I called Philosophical Papers. Get it? Philos with a capital F, that is. Anyway, here we go. Dfpkt, Pod 1, Chapter 1, Introduction. I assume we are part of a real universe of which there can be objective knowledge of facts, and about which we can make true assertions. It's possible to challenge each of these assumptions, although I think they are rational, but anyway, they are my starting point. And given this, I propose the following, which could be called a methodological taxonomy. Now, by taxonomy, I mean a description in the form of a list of types or categories for a specific purpose. So here it is. There are 3 separate things. Features of reality that are or were the case, 1. Things we believe and know about them, 2. And things we say about them, 3. Some of which, in classical logic, may be true or false, given the way we use the words or other signs in context. Of course, things we believe, know and say about features of reality are themselves features of reality. So this taxonomy is only methodological, by which I mean it serves my purpose in this context. Now, I think philosophy's so-called problems come from muddling up these 3 things: what there is or was, what we believe and know, and what we say. For example, we can mistake what we know and say about things for the way things are. And we can think so-called abstract nouns are names of things of some kind that can be described. These mistakes have had strange consequences, not least in philosophical theories of knowledge and truth, and in what is called metaphysics. And those consequences are my quarry. Now, I believe the later Wittgenstein was after the same quarry, at least for some of the time. And I should say here that you'll be hearing more about Wittgenstein from me as this goes on. And full self-disclosure, I self-identify as a Wittgensteinian. Anyway, the muddle we can get into when we forget what language is and how it works begins with what we call definition. So, Chapter 2, Definition. We can use the word define in different ways. For example, to define a word can be to show what it means, how we do or could use it. But by contrast, to define a thing is to describe it, which is a completely different operation. And yet the following is the first definition of the noun dog in the Concise Oxford Dictionary, 9th edition, page 399. So there's a bit of scholarly apparatus. Here's the definition of dog. A carnivorous domesticated mammal, usually having a long snout and non-retractile claws, and occurring in many different breeds kept as pets or for work or sport. Now, in this example, a definition of a word is a description of a thing. We explain the meaning of the word dog, the way we use the word, by describing the thing we name with the word. And this seems a natural thing to do. But there is a two-stage process here involving separate and different linguistic operations. First, we use the word dog to name and talk about the things we call dogs. But second, we can describe those things in some way or other. For example, using names of other things, such as mammal, snout and claw. To put it another way, the two questions, what is the meaning of the word dog and what is a dog, are completely different. But the dictionary treats them as the same question. To define the word dog by describing a dog is to conflate the two separate and different linguistic operations, naming and describing. And this may not seem to matter. After all, we know a name is usually not a description. Naming and describing are different operations. A dog is not the meaning of a word, but rather a real thing, a feature of reality. And a name is not the thing it names, any more than a description is the thing being described. Once pointed out, all this is obvious. The problem comes if we forget these facts and mistake the names we use and the descriptions we produce for the things we name and describe. If we forget that people accepted features of reality do not identify, categorize, name or describe themselves. And I think this forgetting happens more often than we realise. Now, we may think a definition of a thing is somehow a definitive description, one that captures the thing's essence or fundamental nature. But we can always describe things in different ways for different purposes. And this applies to words, by the way, which are also real things we can describe in different ways for different purposes, functionally, grammatically, etymologically, and so on. The point is this: there is no inherently essential or fundamental definition, as in description, of a thing. Talk of accuracy, precision, completeness, essence, fundamental nature, absolute or ultimate reality, or just simple talk of identity is always within the context of one kind of description or another. And I'd like to point something out here. Sometimes I think an objection to philosophical realism is really a justifiable objection to the claim that one kind of description captures the absolute or ultimate nature of reality, as if there is such a thing. And the description anti-realist for such an objection is an example of the problem of labels and their baggage. Now, we can use different ways to explain how we do or could use a word. For example, we can point at a dog to explain how we use the word dog, so-called ostensive definition. And in context, such an explanation may work, or at least help. But there is no natural or necessary connection between a word and the ways we use it. The ways we use words and other signs, for example, to name and describe things, are always contextual and conventional. And this is why linguistic practice, the ways we use words, can change through time. For example, the word silly used to mean innocent. And just to say a bit more here, my point is that a description is always contextual and conventional. Now, perhaps contextually is easy to understand. There are different contexts and therefore different kinds of descriptions. And by conventional, I mean that any description, a linguistic one, for example, always uses the conventions, the linguistic conventions involved in that kind of description, and they may vary between kinds of description. The point is this, and this is the important bit: there is no such thing as a context and convention-free description. I think that's really very important. Chapter 3. Abstract things. The meaning of a noun is the use we make of it, not the thing it names. And let me mention there that perhaps the most famous of the Wittgensteinian slogans is "meaning is use." Meaning is use, which is a little bit enigmatic, but I think it's incredibly important. And on reflection, I think that in my work, what I'm trying to do is to apply and expand and develop what this Wittgensteinian idea means. I think it's very important. Anyway, the meaning of a noun is the use we make of it, not the thing it names. But we do use nouns to name things. So it seems that what we call abstract nouns are the names of abstract things. Belief, knowledge, truth, meaning, justice, beauty, goodness, identity, and so on. Insert the abstract noun of choice. This is the stuff of philosophy. In fact, the expression abstract noun is a grammatical misattribution, because words are real things, such as sounds, marks on paper or screen, or signing gestures. So in the expression abstract noun, the modifier, adjective, abstract does not refer to the word noun. It actually refers to the thing that the abstract noun supposedly names. But pending evidence for the existence of abstract things, there is no reason to believe they exist. I'll say more about that later. More likely, we mistake abstract nouns for things, which therefore we can try to describe. And this delusion has persisted for centuries, hence the perennially insoluble nature of philosophy's so-called problems. For example, the questions, what is knowledge and where does it come from, can fool us into thinking knowledge is a thing with an origin and properties that can be described. So we produce rival theories of knowledge, setting out necessary and sufficient conditions for knowledge to exist, or for something to count as knowledge. And we dignify this palaver with the name epistemology. Or we can fool ourselves by saying abstract things are concepts in minds, more abstract things, as though that explains anything. And then we deepen the confusion by distinguishing between abstract concepts and concrete concepts. Concepts of abstract things, such as knowledge, and concepts of real things, such as the concept of a dog. And this nonsense still passes muster in some circles. The myth of the mind as a separate, abstract or non-physical thing, containing mental things and events, continues to cause endless confusion. But I think it's easy to end the confusion by asking, how can a non-physical cause have a physical effect? Or how can a physical effect be evidence for a non-physical cause? What is the causal mechanism? Abstract things, and this is the point, are remarkably like supernatural things, and an appeal to magic is a childish superstition, in my opinion. Just an aside, I'd add here that I think abstract things are the supernaturalists' Trojan horse, because acceptance of abstract things makes rejection of other non-physical things such as ghosts and gods less tenable. My standing questions are these. What and where are so-called abstract or non-physical things, and in what way do they exist? I am confidently assured that these questions are silly, but answers avoiding question begging or equivocation on the words thing and exist come there none, at least so far in my experience. So here is my conclusion. In fact, what we call a theory of square bracket, insert abstract thing, close bracket, is really a description of the ways we do or could use the word, square bracket, insert abstract noun, close bracket, its cognates and related words. And I maintain that philosophical arguments are only ever about the use of words, not the existence of things. The point being that other discourses deal with the existence and nature of things, such as the natural sciences. The myth of abstract things, however, is ancient, potent, and pervasive. But they are just mysteries invented to explain mysteries of our own invention. A dog chasing its tail needs to rethink the premise. And just to finish off this pod, I said that the myth of abstract things is ancient and potent and pervasive, and this goes back to, and indeed beyond, Plato, where we'll find Socrates asking what things such as piety or goodness or justice really are, and then taking apart, demolishing the answers given by his various interlocutors in the dialogues, exposing how they don't really know what these things really are, as though they are mysterious or strange things. The way I put it elsewhere is that Western philosophy, in the tradition since Plato, in this tradition we have been hamstering in the wheel that Plato set us spinning. I'm not the first person by any means who's thought that. Anyway, that's the end of Dfpkt Pod 1. Thanks for listening or watching, and I hope to see you again.